Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Political Advertising in an Omnichannel Landscape. My name is Ricky Bijlani. I am the Senior Director of Marketing here at AUDIENCEX. I just want to thank you for taking a bit of your time out of your day to join us today. I am going to give this just a couple of minutes to let people finish joining us. And while I do, I'll go over a couple of quick notes before we get started. First, we will indeed be sending a recording of this webinar to all the registrants afterwards, so everyone can look out for that soon. Additionally, we'll be taking some time to answer any questions that you may have at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and submit them at any time via the Zoom's Q&A feature right at the bottom of your screen and the interface. We'll also have some poll questions during our conversation. I'll be your host moderating our webinar. So today, AUDIENCEX is joined in conversation with our partners at Magnite and Vistar Media as we discuss the political advertising landscape in this pivotal midterm year. And we will look at the challenges that political advertisers are facing in the cycle and how traditional advertising can best be supported. Here to guide us through a bit of that today, I am pleased to introduce our speakers. From AUDIENCEX, we have Dave Asch, who is our VP of Sales. From Magnite, Dan Fairclough, who is the Head of Specialized Demand, and Dave Rivera, who is the Head of Channel Partnerships at Vistar Media. Both Dave and Dan, thank you very much for being here today and joining in this discussion. I know it's going to be great. Before diving into our conversation, if you can briefly introduce yourself, including your role and background. We'll start off with our partners first here. So Dan, if you can get started.
Sure. Thanks, Ricky. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be a part of this. My name is Dan Fairclough. I head up Specialized Demand at Magnite. Very unique role in that, in a way, you could call us glutton for punishment in a way. I specialize in performance, DR, and then political, all the unique niche areas of our wonderful media ecosystem. But obviously focus on creating really unique marketplaces and opportunities for advertisers that fit in those categories to take advantage of the full power of omnichannel advertising and all the great things that come with it around automation, aggregation, and using technology to its fullest. So it's a lot of fun.
Thanks, Dan. Dave Rivera, if you can go next.
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks again for having us here today. I'm Dave Rivera. I lead all of our channel partnerships at Vistar Media. I've been in the programmatic space for a little over a decade now, so very early on in its inception. And I've kind of been across the buy side, the supply side, and most recently at Vistar, we're working on solving programmatic specifically for the entire out-of-home industry. So bringing the technology of programmatic to the out-of-home space.
And thanks, Dave. Dave Asch.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Dave Asch. I run US sales for AUDIENCEX. I definitely want to thank Dan and Dave for joining us for this webinar. I think it's super important and super interesting. In today's political landscape, obviously things are supercharged, and there's so many different avenues for advertisers to take advantage of. So I think that this will be a really informative, fun kind of discussion around what's happening and where we can potentially help and be of service to our political friends.
Great, thanks, Dave. So for today's agenda, we've broken up our conversation into 3 different categories here. So we'll go through the political landscape, talk through leveraging new channels, and then reaching your audience. We'll have our audience Q&A at the end of the section here as well. So let's get started here. So for the political landscape, what are the biggest challenges advertisers are currently facing with political ad campaigns? Dave Asch?
Yeah, happy to kick that one off. So I think if you ask 10 politically focused agencies this question, you'd probably get 10 very different answers. But seeing as today's political environment and its respective players on both sides are quite charged up, the importance of breaking through the online clutter, with coherent messaging becomes more important than ever. I think the sheer enormity of available content and media channels that's available today can be exhausting. We're almost a victim of our own technology, and I think to some extent it's overload and the complexities that come along with that. So they're seeing as there's so many options for advertisers to choose from in terms of tactic, in terms of placement, data segments, so on. It's a good and a bad problem. The good is that there's no shortage of scale, right? We can run ads across a wide variety of different platforms and find the scale that we need. However, I think that it's hard to figure out, where do you start? So the political, it's over a short period of time, of course, reaching a specific audience over a short period of time, the conversation could change. So where exactly do you start? And for some, political agencies that I've spoken with, it's a case of where should they start, because there's so many different routes that can be taken.
Great. Thanks, Dave. And similar question to you, Dave, Rivera, and Dan, is it's more with this year. So what are some of the challenges that are unique to this year? Dave, you want to give it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think Dave hit it right on the head there. Like, one of the biggest problems I think we're facing all the time is, where do we engage people and how do we engage them so they can have meaningful conversations, right? And I think the unique challenge that we face right now is everybody is aware that COVID just happened, right? What is behavior in this post-COVID world? And nobody really knows, right? Like, nobody really knows what the future is, what we're going to be doing next. We were kind of in this period where we were locked in our house and everybody was like, TV, they're in their house, right? Laptop, they're in their house. And we're moving into this new post-COVID world, hopefully, right, that we're going into. And it's like, how do you reach people? And in my opinion, what you need right now you need new models, right? You need these new models. And I think everybody is going to face this challenge. What's the right model? And everybody's kind of going through this exercise today saying, in this new world, what is the model that we need to be successful? And because of this disruption, I think that is just a monumental challenge that everybody, not even in the political landscape, but everybody is kind of facing at once. But now even more specifically, it faces this midterm election cycle.
Great. How about you, Dan? Can you chime in here as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think you guys are nailing it. One of those great sayings in the political arena is, don't let any crisis go to waste. And yeah, there's challenges, and with challenges there, I think there are so many wonderful new solutions at our disposal. And it's about working together as a community, because the political landscape is different from the establishment brands, I think, in so many ways, in that we're all in this together. We're all just trying to figure out how to reach the right audience. How do we reach those pivotal voters? How do we, be able to call an audible and switch from just awareness to more of a DR tactic, to a get out the vote? And how do we follow, would-be voters down the funnel of somebody who's going to eventually make a decision and go to the ballot box? And what we're talking about today, I think, is exactly that solution, right? The idea that with omnichannel advertising, in a programmatic environment, we can get very, very smart about hitting the right user at the right time, on the right screen, in the right place, and being able to track that user, through solutions. I think, one of the big buzzwords in holding companies and everywhere is SPO. How do we really limit the number of folks we have to work with and maximize our yield? And how can we achieve success? And the idea that now, we have the ability to automate. We have the ability to, aggregate publishers across screen into one place, and being able, again, to just track that pivotal voter across their behavior, across their content consumption is such a powerful thing, and we could do it better than ever. And I think the thing that we're all mindful of now is viewing behavior has shifted more rapidly than ever, to Dave's point, because of COVID. CTV was already growing so fast and was already past the tipping point of the shift from linear to to connected television, but COVID exacerbated that. And we know that with CTV, there's ever growing available scale. The more people that watch, the more people are now going to be going back to work, the more people are going to be touched on digital out of home, and how important that's going to be on the path to decision making and everything in between, display and online video. And we're now just understanding how powerful some of the solutions our companies are working on can be in helping political advertisers reach the right user where they've lost them in traditional broadcast and traditional methods of reaching them in past.
Yeah, and if I could just pile onto that as well, it's a great point, Dan, that you make in terms of people now getting out of their homes again. People are dying to get out of their homes again, and it's I think, Dave, for you with digital out of home, I mean, it's a seminal moment for you guys as you're able to continue to tell that story that was kind of on pause probably for a couple of years. So I mean, I just think it's a very interesting time where the sequential messaging and being able to find someone on their desktop, and then, as they take a ride somewhere on their mobile device, and then when they land somewhere in between, they're seeing different ads for digital out of home, things of that nature. I think it's a huge opportunity for digital out of home and using those programmatic tactics as well. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like with the new hybrid world, people are going to be at their homes, they're going to be at work, and so they're going to be all over those two places. So this definitely makes sense. But I'd like to kick off our first poll question for the audience today. Here, you'll see that pop up on your screen. So, what is your biggest challenge currently? So, if you take some time, select your choice here. What we'll do is we'll take the results, and then at the end of the conversation during our Q&A section, we'll go ahead and share some of the results and dive into some of the reasons why here. Okay, so let's get started on our next question. This one is do we currently have any concerns about ad inventory levels and costs? Dan, let's if you have some words to chime in there.
Yeah, look, scale is always going to be a problem if you have super minute targets. When everybody is high in demand there, it can get dicey. However, right now it really seems like inventory is ever growing, and that's because of the proliferation of, again, like people who are streaming content and using a multitude of devices to that they could possibly see ads and be touched on. So it's not a major concern, but I think it comes down to like this great philosophical question of how much targeting should be involved, and how much does that possibly limit my scale, and how much do we know that exactly the folks that we're trying to reach are existing within the targeting we're implementing. And I think that there's a lot of testing that still needs to be done to understand, does it make more sense to do that, or does it make sense to cast a wider net? Do we understand better how tight it can get in certain geos? As we know, of course, there's so many very highly contested races this cycle, and things are certainly going to get very tight during the primaries in those specific states and geos, but of course during the generals. So look, I think right now we're trying to understand exactly how that's going to look, but as we know, things are so different from just 2 years ago during the last cycle, and in terms of how people again have changed the way they are digesting content, and just how much available impression they're going to be available on those specific devices and mediums. So right now it seems like there's going to be enough scale, but we're all going to be learning as we go. I think the primaries are a key learning and testing ground for us all to kick the tires and understand exactly how things are going to be, and hopefully inform our strategies going into the general.
And Dan, I don't know if you're seeing this on your end. You'd probably have a better viewpoint of this, but I know something that we see, and I think that political advertisers are going to face, which will be an even more unique challenge, is throughout COVID, a trend that I've found is advertisers, there's almost like this war on information, right? There's so much information on the marketplace. You have to spend money in advertising to correctly message and to own that conversation. So I found that there's people are oversaturating the market, right? So now political advertisers are coming in to this marketplace that is highly competitive, right? Everybody is trying to get their messaging into this marketplace and break through the noise. And they're coming into this inflection point of it and having to come up with their strategies as well. So with that, I mean, something that we run into are prices go up, right? Whenever there's some finite amount of inventory, and we're starting to see that on the exchange where people are coming in and they're trying to secure things as far up front as they can. Whereas, you know, sometimes in the past we would see more last minute, like, let's get this in and test it. They're trying to lock more things in ahead of time.
Great, thanks. So how can we leverage data effectively and securely while ensuring it isn't misused? Dave or Dan, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, from our perspective, you know, I think mostly about out of home, and I think we're in a really unique position because I couldn't target a human if I wanted to, right? I can kind of find groups of humans, but I can't force somebody to stand in front of a screen, and I can't stop somebody from standing in front of a screen. So I think, like, from our standpoint, we have this kind of safeguard against targeting an individual that you might find on other channels. But ultimately, I think a lot of these conversations come down to privacy and consent. And as long as, you know, and I think for the most part, what we're finding is people want good experiences, right? Like when I want the weather in the morning, I want a good experience. I want to be able to get the weather in my location. I'm willing to give up my data to get that value in exchange. And there's a variety of different things like that. And I think just making sure we have a really good ecosystem around that consent, I think, is the most important way for us to move forward as advertisers, and making it obvious. Like we're trying to provide free services here, right? We're trying to pay for these things that hopefully make society better, and the value exchange is advertising.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's more about just you know, like, I think that's so I'm dead on about the user experience, and it goes back to what Dave was talking about too, about just breaking through the clutter with great messaging, and ultimately it's going to come down to that, you know. And there's going to be an inevitable oversaturation of political ads, certainly in the highly contested areas. And I think it's on publishers in so many respects to have quality control of the viewer experience, which so many do, in terms of limiting the amount of political spots they'll have in certain pods, and making sure, you know, they're not running back to back and so on and so forth. But inevitably, it's going to raise price. Frequency is going to go up and up, and that's why Dave's point from before is so important. And data is going to come into play so much as well. And I think for the buyers, it's important to understand exactly how to use it in the most effective way, so that you're hitting the right audience at the right time. And I think it's going to be so much of, you know, understanding Hispanic audience in certain areas, and Asian American, African American, as opposed to just persuadables or leaning right or leaning left. So it's everything comes into play, and there's always options at the table right now, which is what I'm really excited about. I think every RFP we get, we're able to go back to the well and evaluate 6 different options and at least put everything on the table. Does it make sense to do reach here? Does it make sense to go hyper targeted? What is the right frequency to effectively get your message across without oversaturating and obviously hurting intent? So I think it's all of us are working to come up with those tools in a smarter way.
Yeah, and I would just add to that I think this call is interesting only because we have components of each kind of piece of this. We have, you know, Dave, your digital out of home, which is more of a one-to-many, you know, type of target, whereas, you know, AUDIENCEX sells an omnichannel solution, which is one-to-one or one-to-many, and then of course, Dan, you provide the backbone of these types of deals. So it's going to be really paramount, like you were saying, Dan, with regards to media buying, really concentrating on what that goal and objective is for this particular candidate. Are they looking to build a list of email addresses? Are they looking to just sway particular voters one way or another? Are they looking to reach, you know, street corner level type of people that they know are walking in certain traffic patterns every day or driving by certain things every day? so they can use digital out of home. It's really just, it's important that each one of these political agencies really understand how best to activate against what the goals and objectives are. So.
Great, thank you for that. So let's jump into our next category section, leveraging new channels. Before we get started, we'll launch another audience poll here. So you should see that shortly on your screen. There, what channels are you including? What channels are included in your current marketing mix? And so this is a multi-choice choice here. So feel free to select as many channels as that you're currently using. With that, we'll let that stick on for a few minutes and get started on some of the questions. So how can you best augment traditional political advertising with new technologies and channel?
Yeah, I'll touch on that one. You know, I think when it comes to augmenting different channels, different tactics, you think of Omnichannel and its importance in the whole grand scheme of things. There's so many, again, there's so many options today. So if you hearken back to the days of, I guess, my childhood, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, I guess, you think about the blitz of ads you see in the political season on TV, on broadcast TV, and what you hear on terrestrial radio. That still exists, but obviously with the onslaught of digital, you know, you have connected TV now, you have digital at home, you have programmatic audio and podcasting and that sort of thing. There are so many, you know, so many different ways to take that message and try and reach the appropriate audience. We haven't even talked about email yet. I mean, I can show you my inbox now, and I have a multitude of different Senate candidates and House candidates that have been pushing through messages for a while now. But I think we all see the importance of social as well. You know, we see how Facebook affected the elections just in the last election cycle. The power and expansion of video inventory really gives marketers the ability to simply repurpose TV creative for online. So I think the power of omnichannel marketing, you know, lends itself to candidates being able to reach voters with sequential messages throughout the day. And, you know, as we all know, it's difficult for human beings to sit still in one place for any extended period of time. I mean, I don't think I'm saying too much with that. So there's a heightened importance around messaging folks at certain times of the day and on specific devices. The amazing thing is the fact that we actually have the ability to do this and then track it. So I think at the end of the day, long story short, you have to find the right mix of what works. And, you know, it's really best for political advertisers not to overthink it and go with their gut and go with what, you know, has worked and try some new things as well.
Thanks, Dave. And just to dive into that a little bit more, how can CTV be leveraged alongside a traditional approach? Dan?
I think it's just a brand new frontier for a lot of folks. I mean, well, look, it was around in 2016 and 18, and then 20, it became a must-have line item on a media buy that needed to be paid attention to because there was just a rich audience there that you could reach that ultimately are the folks that eroded the amount of impressions available on traditional television. Now, you know, look, when we work with a lot of our partners and our, you know, Magnite, our bread and butter is CTV, we still see an extraordinary amount of revenue coming through the traditional channels of display and online video, or at least the traditional, you know, advertising that's existed for the past few cycles in digital and programmatic. And there's still such a significant amount that comes through there because of its targetability, measurability, and everything that goes with it. But CTV is the future of viewing for, you know, premium, high quality, live, on-demand content from the best providers available. It is taking the place of linear. It's inevitable. It's happening faster, like I mentioned before, than any of us could have ever guessed. And look, with it, there are challenges, but there's also opportunity, as we also discussed before. I mean, it's the power of TV in terms of its reach and its impact, but it's also the power of digital and its targetability and its measurability, and the fact that you can aggregate so many publishers together in one deal, I think is an ease of execution that is required from political advertisers. I mean, ultimately, we all know, especially when the going gets tough and we're down to the nitty gritty, that it's the 11th hour that, dollars have to get spent, audiences have to get reached. It's the ability to automate, make launches timely and efficient, things like creative approvals, which obviously is as important as anything, which can be challenging to make that process more efficient and quicker, so that you're able to get the job done, is what it's going to be all about. I think that's table stakes, and I think it's what we're all working on together that does just that. So it's going to CTV. Long story short, again, I think it's going to be the necessary complement, ever growing part of every media strategy moving forward. And ultimately, I think, look, it's 2022 now. By the time we're in the next presidential cycle, with the way things are evolving so quickly in this wild world we're in, I think it will be traditional at that point, and we'll be looking at some other new nifty way of reaching voters from some new app that Elon Musk will buy, that we'll be figuring out how to make sense of. So that's at least where we are now. I think CTV's crossed over the tipping point from being the new shiny toy to being an essential and paramount part of your strategy to reach voters.
Yeah, definitely. And similar question to you, Dave, as well. How can digital out of home be leveraged alongside a traditional approach?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to echo a lot of what Dan was saying. I mean, we're really at this, the opportunity right now is advertising's kind of getting reimagined, right? We have all of these digital techniques that we've perfected over time, and now we're able to apply them to some of the most impactful formats of media that have ever existed in the history of, humanity, right? Television has been a part of our culture for so long, right? Out of home has been a part of our culture for so long. And the traditional way of buying these things has been, for out of home, it's site selected. I want these billboards in these places. That's it, right? Now I can say, oh, I know how people are moving around the physical world because I know where their mobile phones are going, right? This technology came from mobile location companies. We can now apply this technology, this movement, to digital screens in the real world and activate them as people are moving around. That makes a more efficient buy. And now that you can introduce dynamic creative, you can now have relevant messages to those people, right? And that's where we want to get to, that going back to that user experience. What is the right user experience? I think the right user experience is probably not sitting at a CTV, spot comes up and then having the same ad play over and over and over again, right? Like, that's not the best experience. Having a message that speaks to me more personally and resonates with me, that's where I think the real impact could come from. And I don't think we've gotten there today. I think we still have a kind of a big leap we need to make, because to me, that is a creative and technology solution that we need to come up. And I still think there's a silo between kind of these teams that are doing media planning and then the teams that are doing creative. And until we try to break down those barriers, I think it's going to be really hard to really get where we want to go ultimately.
Great, thanks. And just one more question before we jump over to our next section here. For you, Dave Asch, how do you determine the right channel mix overall?
Yeah, I think, I can't speak on behalf of the way these types of deals are planned, but seeing how they come in and what we pitch and the types of tactics that we promote based on goals and objectives, again, that's really the end all be all, is what is the KPI that is looking to be reached here? What are we trying to just sway an audience one way or the other? Are we looking to combat in-market messaging right now with with conquest type of ads or things of that nature? Again, if there's a candidate or a party that's looking to find email addresses, or if there's some sort of form fill that needs to be filled out, we'll probably run more lower funnel type channels like your display with high levels of frequency and search and some social. If it's really, again, if it's a share of voice type of play, and one party has an attack ad on one, like we always see, we know that the other party is going to be in market within less than 48 or 72 hours with something to go against that with a video ad of their own. So that's more upper funnel addressed. That's addressed with more upper funnel tactics like video, connected TV, traditional TV, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's just a matter of the consequences at hand, really.
Great, thanks, Dave. Let's jump over to our last section for today, reaching your audience. Before we get started here, we'll launch our last audience poll that you'll see on the screen. Yeah, you should see on your screen now. Have you seen better performance using audience segmentation or by casting a wider net? So we'll put this poll up for a minute or so. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions we have here. How do you find an engaged audience across all these channels? So, Dan, if you want to jump in here for, how do you find this engaged audience across probably, these channels, but more specifically on the CTV side too?
Well, I mean, I think that there's we can understand who's watching what, how much they watch it. I remember before I was at Telaria, which then became Magnite, I spent some time at Hulu working in performance marketing, which I still run over at Magnite. And I remember understanding at Hulu, all publishers know who's watching what, and how much they're watching it. And I was always amazed how we would get statistics like there are 20,000 people who have watched every episode of Law and Order SVU in the past 6 months, which means that these people are watching 6 hours of SVU every single day, which is scary, but people do it, and so, I think that there are ways to target those people. And if you're looking for people who are engaged or people who consume, or you're looking for binge watchers, those are the kind of targets we see advertisers all the time looking for in different categories, like maybe direct to consumer advertisers. I think political advertisers can lean on, in a lot of ways, I think, performance advertisers strategies to help find voters, because in a lot of ways, the way direct to consumer brands target folks now on CTV and digitally is exactly the way that people now are using devices and digesting content. So it might be an interesting way to look at augmenting some targeting strategies, as opposed to just trying to find persuadables or a specific socioeconomic or ethnicity. Maybe look at, we know our voters watch that, and we know people do contextual targeting all the time, but it's really quite interesting to know, how you can find certain types of people based on the crazy binge watching habits we've all grown to have now.
Great, thanks, Dave. For you, Dave, a little bit almost the same type of question is, how do you connect with that audience meaningfully? I think with digital out of home, it's, there's a big opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I talk to clients, we'll spend 95% of our conversations talk about targeting people, and they'll give me a creative that won't have the message at all compared to the campaign objective. So a lot of the times when I think about talking to people, it's like, what does a creative look like? How are you going to delight somebody and engage them in a conversation? And to me, that's half of the battle. Like, targeting is relatively easy, right? You input exactly who you want to find. The computers are really good now. They'll find those people for you. We can get in front of them. I think one of the bigger challenges that we face is, what do you say to them once you have them? What's going to resonate? And I think that is what, we don't spend as much time on these days, but I think really having a simple, creative message that resonates, that's what's really important with folks.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that. You guys are nailing it. It's always about telling a story. That's what people react to. And I think that the most successful campaigns, at least the ones that we all know about on a national level that were as successful as they were, did so because they told a story and they understood the changes in the world around them. They were able to make adjustments based for the way people were reacting to that content. And I think that, you know, again, for political candidates, if they're able to tell a story and they're able to reach people in the right way at the right time, it's going to go very, very, very far. And there are a lot of tools to help them do that nowadays more than ever, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think my only caveat to that, to kind of play devil's advocate, just to keep the conversation going a little bit, is that there's so much. Like, there are so many different avenues that an advertiser can take, and there's so many, not even from a tactical perspective, but just from a channel perspective. Like, should I spend on TV? Should I, you know, should we just do programmatic audio? I heard that that's, you know, becoming a bigger influence on people lately. It's just the continuous shift in where eyes and ears are, and the influence that media consumption is having on where they're consuming their media. Like, you want to get in front of that so quickly. So again, I feel like we can be a kind of you can be a victim of our own technology because it's moving and evolving so fast. So again, it's a good problem. It's a good and a bad problem. It's because there is so much going on. You need to work with trusted companies that understand the complexities of programmatic, that understand how to locate an audience, how to find users, how to message accordingly, and, you know, hopefully tell your story in the best, you know, possible way, and cut through that clutter, like I said originally.
Yep, that makes sense. Dave Asch, so what tactics would you recommend employing for political and advocacy campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, like I've been saying, I think it really all depends on what that client is looking to do, the audience that they're looking to reach, the tactics at their disposal. You know, if it's political in nature and we're down to the 11th hour and we're getting towards, you know, September, October, I'm assuming at that point in time it's going to be heavy video. It's going to be a lot of back and forth. You know, but budgets come down very quickly. So, you know, you really have to decide on where best to spend that type of money, with which tactics can be implemented as quickly and as efficiently as possible towards that data, that set of data that you're looking to target. But it really varies across the board.
Great, thanks, Dave. Are there certain formats more effective than others? And does that vary by demographic?
I tend to think out of home's probably the best performing.
Yeah,
Well, I'm selfishly.
No, Dan, you'd probably have a lot more insight.
I was just kind of waiting to see, you know. You know, of course, I think that, yeah, we know that the Hispanic community, for example, is very, very heavy mobile users, and we know that is well over proportionate comparative to other ethnicities. You know, I think what is amazing is that we are able to reach specific ethnicities very, very well across device, depending on where they're watching. So yeah, there's certainly differences out there as to how they consume content. But I think the key point here is that we're able to reach them regardless of what those might be.
Yeah, we haven't even touched so heavily on multicultural, but I think that's an enormous market, obviously coming into a heated election season. So yeah, I mean, just the fact that we have the technology to find these types of users, target against them, really push a message either one way or the other is really a testament to the industry as a whole.
And then last question for everyone here is, how can political advertisers stay agile and responsive for scalability?
You know, I think it's about exactly what we're trying to do right now is have conversations with key partners who are able to ultimately be the ones who are timely, the ones who move quickly, the ones who have made finding that audience as efficient and easy as possible. And obviously, again, I think it's kicking the tires to make sure the scale's there when you need it, where you need it. You know, there's as Dave mentioned, there's just so much out there. I mean, I think it's about finding the partners you can trust, who you know, are able to agnostically find exactly who you're looking for, in the most efficient and timely manner. It all just comes down to that. So I mean that's all we're focused on, and I think that's how we all win. You know, that I think is the key here, is just move quick, make it easy, simple, you know, or at least as simple as we can make it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I think, you know, thinking about the human interaction that happens on the other end of this advertising is like really important, right? And thinking about that marketing mix. And this is where I think we're in a new place where it's not set it and forget it anymore, right? Everything that kind of used to work yesterday, it might not be the same. So just taking that level of like critical thinking when planning and saying, hey, am I oversaturating this channel? Am I oversaturating this channel? What is the experience going to be for the user? You know, if they are hearing me on this channel too much and not hearing me on any other. So I think having that right balance is important. And I think, you know, we're in a place right now where advertisers kind of have to take some risks. And that's probably what needs to happen over just the next couple of years till we figure out what those right models are.
Great, thank you. So let's dive into our poll questions. And so here I'll just repeat the question and then showcase like what is the majority of the answers trending towards. So the first poll question, if you remember, it's what is your biggest challenge currently? This is around the political landscape. The highest by far is the targeting, finding the correct audience. And then second is scale and inventory. So a question for you both, Dan and Dave, is this what you're expecting and seeing from the customers that you're working with?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. You know, ultimately, when it comes down to it, all we need is the scale. And we need to know we're hitting the right people at the right time. So I think we're all working in tandem to make us all smarter at doing that and better at doing that. But at least, you know, for me, it's all about test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, crawl, walk, run. You know, everything we build, and I think we all probably do, is a crawl, walk, run mentality. If we can figure out what is going to yield the most fruit, you know, for us, and goes back to that question before. There's a right place and right time for targeting on a much more granular level. There's time and place where I need to hit people, you know, and I think it's just being able to act on that and being able to understand what's working better than others, or which new tools or tricks or which new providers out there might be able to help us. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I think this poll is very indicative of kind of what's going on in this marketplace, right? We are in a kind of ultra competitive advertising marketplace. So finding the right audience is primary, pricing is secondary, right? We need to find the right people to get the message across, because going back to this almost like war of information that's happening in the marketplace, it's hard to find these people. And if you can find the people, price is not always the first thing that is in consideration for that.
Yeah, I would just say that it is definitely hard to find these folks. And once you find them, it's hard to hold their attention span, I think, is a big part of it as well. So, you know, the creative comes into the mix, and the message that you're driving really needs to hit home. You have a short period to do it. And I think then, you know, you move on to the next. You wait for, if it is a straight, you know, political type of campaign with X versus Y, you know, that you're already, you get your message out to market, you're already kind of focused on the next message that you're going to be bringing to market. So you want to really make sure that you know, you bring a message that is concise and clear, and getting the point across to sway in your favor.
Great, thank you. And so we'll jump over to our results of our second poll. The question was, what channels are included in your current marketing mix? Pretty interesting results here. I'll start off with the least used channel, which is the digital out of home. So Dave, is this what you're seeing too? A lot of the folks that you're working with, they're not leveraging digital out of home yet?
Yeah, I mean, overall, out of home has kind of, as a traditional channel, it's maintained growth, but it's lost market share. So if you think about even the overall advertising market share, out of home makes up 3 to 5%, right? It's the oldest form of media. Everybody knows it's super impactful. And I think the one reason that it becomes tough to add to the media plan goes down to measurement, right? On all of these other channels, you have a direct kind of measurement or optimization KPI that you can kind of tie to. And it's hard for advertisers to invest in digital out of home because nobody can click on a billboard, right? Does a billboard work? Absolutely. I think we all know that, right? But nobody clicks on it and then goes to your website, where when you're on your Instagram ad or a social feed, you'll click on something and you'll go directly potentially sign up. And that's not something that always is clear. And that's something we spend just a lot of time educating folks on, is how can we now use all the technology that we built in-house to bring digital out of home to that same attributable plane, right? Because as soon as you can measure it, people will treasure it, right? So that's the first thing, is let's get this stuff measured. And that's what we spend a lot of time just having conversations with folks, is how can we measure this? And specifically for political, I think running brand studies on out of home is really interesting, because you can ask people questions about, what type of voter are you? What are you thinking about voting? And that gives you more optimization points in this space.
Yeah, I saw some few observation here, in LA. I've seen some digital out of home where they have the QR codes as well. So that, for some of the elections down here in California. But yeah, I just want to get is that what a lot of clients are looking into as well? Or does that give?
So personally, if you're asking my opinion, QR codes don't work. Controversial opinion here. I don't think humans like taking pictures of black and white gibberish. I just don't think there's a value exchange. I think they like taking photos of sunsets, their children, their families. If you need a menu, yeah, you'll pull out your phone, right? There's no other way to get a menu. You need to pay for something, yeah, you have to do it. When you're walking by advertising, I don't necessarily know if everybody's going to be like, well, let me grab my phone. We don't tend to see that. When we have clients, they run QR codes. We don't see necessarily that people are going there and pulling out their phone and activating them. But I think Coinbase had an excellent execution during the Super Bowl, right? But then to me, that goes back to the creative, right? What they did was they made a really creative story. They had the QR code floating around for a very long time. So you were like, I need to see what this is. It played on our curiosity. There's not, to me, that universal value exchange for QR codes yet. We may get there. Today, we don't really see that on our side.
And then, yeah, thanks, Dave. So for the same question, just observation on the CTV side. So CTV is one of the higher channels used, slightly more than linear TV as well. And then we're seeing it align with social and display. So Dan, is that what you're seeing on your side as well?
Yeah, it makes me feel a little bit better about what I said before about how we've definitely crossed the tipping point. So sounds like the poll's a bit of a microcosm of that. So, but yeah, I think so. I think it's about reach, and it's about eyeballs. Social search display is a great way to reach people during a certain mindset that they have during the day and a certain behavior that they're doing. It doesn't mean the ads are as impactful. And I think because of the reach of CTV and how impactful it can be, yeah, that is now, just as important as all those great additional supplemental trackable touch points we can have on search display and other digital. But I have to say digital out of home is just as important, and it's a great, wonderful way to tie a message home. It's additional touch point, and obviously it has a ridiculous amount of reach as well. And I think it's going to be interesting as people are traveling more, and something that I think about. I think COVID showed folks that they can travel and still work, and so I wonder if that's a new behavior that we haven't yet truly understood how it's going to affect the way people are watching and digesting content. I mean, I worked from different places throughout this thing. And I think now that we're going back to the office, but in some cases we're able to still work remotely, that changes the way people live and work and play and everything. So like we said, I think at the beginning of this, we're still learning. And I think there's a lot to learn this cycle about how we're all changing and our behavior is changing.
Yeah, another interesting thing for you, Dave Asch, is every single channel was selected. And so, it makes it difficult, right, to address all different channels as well. So just want to get your thoughts on that too, Dave Asch.
All the channels chosen in the poll question, you mean?
In the poll question, yeah, linear, CTV, traditional, out of home, digital, radio.
They're all going to be
audio,
activated. Yeah, they're all going to be activated in various ways throughout. I mean, right now it's a busy time, and then we'll probably go through a bit of a lull over the next couple months, right? And then, come August, September, October, it'll probably get crazy again. And yeah, I think it's just going to continue to be a mix of testing and learning and reach and efficiency, and hopefully that turns into swaying people in the direction that some of these guys want to do that. So that's all I got.
Yep, perfect. And then I know we're up against time here, so let's dive into our third poll question. Have you seen better performance using audience segmentation or by casting a wider net? And so, the results, audience segmentation is about 70% versus 30% of casting a wide net. Just a quick thoughts on the panelists here.
I just think that goes along with when those things are applicable. And there's probably times where you have no choice but to cast a wide net, and there's times when probably again the majority of the time, or 70% of the time, apparently, that targeting is more important. But I'd love to let's do some Q&A.
Yep.
While we still have some time, that would be great to see if there's any other questions.
Sure.
Yep. And so one question here is, how can we navigate restrictions and requirements on social media platforms? And then with that, which are best suited for political advertising?
Tough for me to say this because we don't really do any social at Magnite, so I'm not the expert on that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I would had a more formulative answer to that. We have a search and social department at AUDIENCEX that would be so much more well equipped to answer that question. But I do believe you look back at social, that it's basically decided elections in the past, and it hasn't been around, more than 15 years or so. So there's a crucial element to each of the platforms that will be accessible. I can't speak to which ones, we will be or political agencies will be able to utilize more so than not. I know obviously there's a lot against Facebook right now. But it feels like there's new platforms that are coming out on a weekly, monthly basis.
Right.
I think this whole Elon Musk thing with Twitter will be a big talking point over the next 30, 60, 90 days as well, to see if that acquisition goes through. I'm sure he has a lot of changes in store if it does, which would affect things like politics. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I think it just also it comes down to sentiment and what the kind of advertising on those platforms actually, how it makes people feel. And we did a piece of research back in 2020, and I'm sure it's evolved even more because of that election. People who receive ads on social, they're much more skeptical naturally. I mean, and the whole world has promoted that tenfold of late. So it's which platforms do people trust most to actually believe, the stuff that they're reading. And I think that, social is very much probably at the bottom of that list. So while, probably don't have the best advice as to which ones to trust most, I'd also just, be mindful of where it belongs within the overall strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't take a stab at this, but I do have an opinion. But I feel like there's probably a difference between organic social and paid social, right? So there's probably something that you could do with a trusted, and I always think about people that there's these brand pages and you're talking to your constituents in a certain way, and how do you promote that in a smart way to really tell that linear story that you're trying to tell overall, right? Because I think about ads and social as supportive, right? You have this kind of main organic thing that you're doing. How do you support that messaging potentially with advertising, bringing more people into your group, making sure everybody's aware of the messaging?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, another tidbit. I mean, even podcasts, even though it might not be social media platforms, there's a similar following of, certain speakers and things like that. So things do change. There's always a way to reach your audience. So it just depends on, the strategy and tactic. So with that, I'll just, we'll have time for one more question, maybe two. So what types of targeting could be used for advocacy and cause-based messaging?
I think that there are a number of really highly trusted, highly used data providers out there that have a whole myriad of taxonomies to where you could, utilize various third-party identifiers to understand those who might have had a propensity to be involved in one cause or another, or had donated to one cause or another, who was their viewing or content consumption has indicated that they digest certain sites that are specific to one cause or advocacy focus or another. So I think that there is a very large wealth of targeting capabilities across the major providers to be able to find these folks. It's just about testing it out and seeing if it actually yields for what you're trying to do.
Yep, I would echo that as well. There's a lot of really large providers that have spent a lot of time looking at human behavior and things like that and have segmented it. So political advertisers can go in and activate on that. And, some of the best sources of data there are, the individual voter records that they get access to, the kind of first party data. So being able to pull in their own data as well and activate against that is really important.
Yeah, I think
Oh, go ahead, Dave. Sorry, buddy.
I was going to say, I think advocacy and philanthropy go hand in hand. So I think there's a crossover of data segments that, can be absolutely activated that would be a good fit for advocacy clients looking to reach specific types of donors, like you were saying, in different arenas, different verticals, that sort of thing.
Ricky, I did see one question in the chat. I'm not sure if we want to maybe touch on that one because I know it came in while we were still on one of the topics, but I think it's important though. And it was, what about digital media censorship of conservative and Republican candidates? And we know that there's, maybe stuff going on certain social networks. I would just say this, based on that, in my experience from where I sit, and remember, I sit with an organization, a company that's agnostic when it comes to, we have publishing partners, DSP partners, we work with everybody. The individual publishers really, they have to accept both sides of the aisle. Now I can't speak for any one of them and how they go about doing their business. And it's always obviously about price, ultimately, normally, who's going to pay the highest. But I do not see on our platform specifically, which covers so many publishers out there across the online video, display, and connected television world, any type of special treatment towards one side or the other. We are very much agnostic as it can be. And my understanding is that that's exactly what the law states all publishers and platforms need to be as well. So, that's as far as I know about that subject, but just wanted to make sure we touched on it because I saw it come up 20 minutes ago or so.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for catching that, Dan.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, we're up against our time here. So thank you, Dan, and both of our Daves for participating. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's session. With spending in 2022, midterms projected to be on par with the 2020 presidential election at a record-setting $9 billion, it's important than ever to approach your advertising with an informed and empowered strategy that leverages the potential of omnichannel. With that, we'll be sending this recording out to all the registrants afterwards. And then if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to our panelists and speakers here or via email. We're more than happy to answer your questions on any of this or anything surrounding advertising in general.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.